That movie where the ape is the reasonable one, the human is the problem, and by the end, you're not entirely sure the ape is wrong. That was Planet of the Apes, 1968. At the center is Taylor, played by Charlton Heston, an astronaut who left Earth because he couldn't stand what people were doing to each other, crash-landed more than 2,000 years in the future, and discovered the hard way there's nowhere far enough to run. The apes who hunt him and cage him and put him on trial aren't monsters. They have scientists, politicians, a legal system, and a god. The humans are the animals. Taylor is the one animal who won't stop talking. The cast was something. Roddy McDowell as Cornelius, the chimpanzee archaeologist who knows more than he's allowed to say. Kim Hunter as Zira, the scientist who keeps insisting on the truth. Maurice Evans as Dr. Zaius, the orangutan who already knows exactly how this ends for humanity, and decided long ago we don't deserve to be told. They made you laugh at the wrong moments, go quiet at the right ones, and walk out of the theater looking at strangers a little differently than when you walked in. But the real story behind this film, the one that happened off camera, is stranger than anything that made it to the screen. Because the people who built it were blacklisted, fired, heartbroken, and in at least one case, secretly working for the CIA. Today we're counting down 15 weird facts about Planet of the Apes that you probably didn't know. Before we dive in, subscribe and stick around for number 1. It involves the man who wrote Taylor's contempt for the human race and spent every year of his own life hoping he was wrong. Let's get into the countdown with number 15. Number 15. The budget cut that created Planet of the Apes. Rod Serling was the hottest writer in American television when he was first approached to adapt Planet of the Apes, The Twilight Zone, Patterns, Requiem for a Heavyweight. The initial approach came from a small production outfit called King Brothers Productions, who held the rights briefly. That deal fell apart on budget. Then producer Arthur Jacobs acquired the project and brought Serling back. He wrote approximately 3 drafts. His Ape City looked like a version of Manhattan run by gorillas. Department stores with ape mannequins in the windows, movie theater marquees, traffic cops in uniform directing cars through intersections. Serling wanted the audience to feel the wrongness of it, the way you feel the wrongness of a dream. Everything familiar, everything off. The studio rejected it. Not because it was bad, because it was too expensive to build. A full-functioning ape metropolis in 1967 was beyond what any budget could support. So they brought in a second writer, and we'll get to the full story of who that was because it's its own thing. And the ape society was stripped back, primitive, pre-industrial, stone architecture carved into desert cliffs. The kind of world that could be built on location in Arizona for a fraction of what Serling's version would have cost. That is the film we got. The budget version, the fallback. The version Serling imagined was never built. The version that replaced it grossed $33.3 million, launched a franchise that's still running, and produced the single most recognizable sci-fi ending in American cinema. The film nobody's ever seen might have been brilliant. The one that exists because they couldn't afford it changed everything. Number 14. The most famous Apes lines weren't in the script. Charlton Heston spent most of Planet of the Apes filming in the Arizona desert in temperatures that regularly hit 100 degrees. He was also, for much of it, running a fever. The script gave him this line for the moment Taylor finally gets his voice back and speaks for the first time in front of the apes. "Get away from me, you dirty ape." What Heston actually said, sick and angry and probably not entirely comfortable, was, "Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape." He'd used the phrase "damn dirty" in a previous film, The Warlord, 2 years earlier. It was sitting somewhere in his head, and it came out. Nobody stopped him. They used the take. Then the final beach scene. The script gave Taylor almost nothing for the moment he sees the Statue of Liberty. What Heston delivered instead, in one take, unrehearsed, was the entire speech. "You maniacs! You blew it up! God damn you all to hell!" Improvised, complete. On camera the first time. Here's the kicker. After filming wrapped, the producers got a note from censors who were uncomfortable with that final line, worried it would read as blasphemy and cause rating problems. Heston went to the censors directly and argued, with a straight face, that Taylor wasn't blaspheming. He was calling upon God to condemn the guilty. That's a prayer, not a curse. The censors accepted this argument. The line stayed. At number 13, Burt Lancaster said in a Charlton Heston made history. Burt Lancaster passed on Planet of the Apes. He thought the material was childish. He couldn't see himself running around in a loincloth on a planet full of talking gorillas, and he didn't particularly try to hide that. The producers had already been through John Wayne, Marlon Brando, Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, Sean Connery, and Rock Hudson. Lancaster said no, and they got to Heston, who said yes within an hour of hearing the pitch. This was not a coincidence. This was a pattern. Lancaster had also turned down the 10 Commandments before Heston played Moses. He turned down Ben-Hur before Heston won the Oscar for it. He passed on the agony and the ecstasy in Khartoum, 5 films in a row. 5 times Lancaster looked at a script and decided it wasn't for him. 5 times Heston picked it up and made it iconic. Lancaster was a great actor, serious, acclaimed, selective, but he had a blind spot for exactly the kind of grand, slightly overheated material Heston could turn into something permanent. Heston later said Taylor reflected his own views on mankind more than any other role he'd ever played. Lancaster looked at the same character and saw a man in a loincloth running from gorillas. He made that call 5 times. Number 12, the silent role with a studio scandal behind it. Linda Harrison met Richard Zanuck at a Fox premiere. She was Miss Maryland at the time, recently signed to a 7-year Fox contract after a talent scout spotted her at a national pageant. Zanuck was the president of 20th Century Fox, the man who had final say on which films got made, the man who had kept Jacobs alive long enough to make this one. Zanuck put Harrison in early makeup test footage for the film. Then, when the real movie was cast, she was moved to Nova, the mute primitive human who doesn't speak. Not a single line of dialogue. She had more lines in the test footage than in the entire feature. The producer Mort Abrahams said she was never a diva, never difficult, always professional, always on time, always stayed late. A total joy, he said. She appeared in the sequel too. Then, in late 1970, Darryl F. Zanuck, Richard's father, the founder of the studio, fired his own son at a board of directors meeting. Publicly, Richard was out. Around the same time, Linda Harrison's 7-year Fox contract was terminated. She later sued for wrongful termination. The lawsuit was settled out of court. The two of them had married in 1969. They divorced in 1978. After the divorce, she appeared in 2 more films produced by Richard Zanuck. Some things outlast even all of that. Number 11. The child star who came back under an ape mask. McDowell was famous at 12. How Green Was My Valley, Lassie Come Home. He was a household name before most kids had learned to read properly. A genuine child star in the full golden age Hollywood sense of the phrase. Then he grew up and the industry moved on, the way it does. By the mid-1960s, he was taking villain guest spots on the Batman TV series and filling small character parts in films that nobody particularly remembered. The kind of work that keeps an actor in the guild without making anyone notice he's there. Arthur Jacobs told him about the role of Cornelius on an airplane, offered it to him while they were in the air. McDowell said yes. What followed was 4 hours in the makeup chair every morning, starting in the dark, finishing when the sun was up, ready for cameras at 8. He was so claustrophobic in the prosthetics that, at the end of each shooting day, he reportedly grabbed the foam latex appliances and ripped them straight off his face, taking skin with them by all accounts because he simply needed to be out. He did this every single day of production and then came back the next morning and did it again. He appeared in 4 of the 5 films. He became the emotional center of a franchise that defined popular culture for a decade. His face under 4 pounds of latex. Number 10, the blacklisted actress behind the ape mask. Kim Hunter won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in 1952 for A Streetcar Named Desire, opposite Marlon Brando, first on Broadway and then in the film. Then Red Channels published its list. Red Channels was a McCarthy-era pamphlet that named suspected communist sympathizers in the entertainment industry. Kim Hunter was on it, not because she was a communist, she wasn't. She was a liberal Democrat who'd sponsored a 1949 World Peace Conference and had her name attached to various progressive causes. That was enough. The industry that had just given her its highest honor stopped hiring her for films. She described it later with a flatness that's hard to read without feeling it. I won the Oscar, and I couldn't get a job because of the blacklist. She worked in theater. She worked in television. The film world she'd just conquered closed its doors. Then in 1967, Arthur Jacobs cast her as Dr. Zira. She had to take prescription sedatives every morning while the makeup was applied. The prosthetics took hours and terrified her. She did it anyway, every single day. The film about a society that punishes those who speak truth cast the Oscar winner who'd been punished for speaking it. Nobody planned the irony. It was just accurate. Number 9, the set started acting like the movie. The gorillas sat with the gorillas. The chimps sat with the chimps. The orangutans sat with the orangutans. And the humans sat by themselves, every day at lunch, on the set of a film about exactly this. No director's memo, no seating chart, no instruction from anyone. Kim Hunter later said that during filming, she barely spoke to Morris Evans off camera, despite having worked with him before filming and being perfectly friendly with him as a person. On set, he was Dr. Zayas. He was an orangutan. She was a chimp. Without thinking about it, she treated him like one of the others. Charlton Heston wrote about it in his memoir and could only say, "I noted an instinctive segregation on the set. Not only would the apes eat together, but the chimpanzees ate with the chimpanzees, the gorillas with the gorillas, the orangutans with the orangutans, and the humans ate by themselves. It was quite spooky. I have no explanation for it whatsoever." The actors weren't method. They weren't committing to their characters over lunch. It just happened, the way things happen when you change how people look long enough and completely enough. No one planned it, no one stopped it. Heston had no explanation, neither does anyone else. Number 8. The Oscar legend who misjudged Planet of the Apes. Ingrid Bergman had won the Academy Award 3 times. She'd survived a scandal that would have finished most careers. Her relationship with Roberto Rossellini produced a child out of wedlock and got her denounced on the floor of the United States Senate. She survived that. She came back. The woman who gave the world Casablanca and Notorious kept working at the highest level for 30 years. She was offered the role of Dr. Zira, the chimpanzee scientist, the emotional heart of Planet of the Apes. She said no. She didn't believe the film could work. She couldn't see herself in an ape mask on a desert planet, and she trusted that instinct. She passed. Then the film came out. She watched it, and whatever she felt sitting in that theater, it was enough that she later confided to her daughter, Isabella Rossellini, that turning down Planet of the Apes was one of the greatest regrets of her career, that she'd misjudged it completely, that it would have been the perfect chance to stop being Ingrid Bergman for a while. Number 7. The beard that changed Planet of the Apes. Edward G. Robinson played Dr. Zayas in the $5,000 test reel that convinced Fox to bankroll the actual film. Without Robinson agreeing to sit in that makeup chair, without the footage being convincing enough to get Zanuck on board, the film almost certainly doesn't get made. Then, weeks before principal photography began, he was gone. The official story, maintained for decades by Charlton Heston, Kim Hunter, and the production publicly, was that Robinson's health made the physical demands of the role, the heat, the hours in makeup, the months of exterior shooting, too great a risk. A reasonable explanation, a humane one, a lie. The real story, which John Chambers, the makeup designer, eventually told, Robinson refused to shave his beard. The prosthetic appliances couldn't be applied over it. There was no version of the transformation that worked with Robinson keeping the beard. Chambers told the producer flatly that Robinson would have to go. Jacobs, who had already been looking for a reason to replace Robinson with a cheaper English actor, used the confrontation as the exit he needed. Both sides agreed the cover story was better for everyone. It held for over 30 years. Maurice Evans, the Shakespearean actor perhaps best known at the time for playing Samantha's father on Bewitched, stepped into the role. He was excellent. The film is unimaginable without his performance. And Robinson, the man whose face launched the movie, was invited to a private screening of the finished film. He watched it. He knew what it had become. He never spoke publicly about the beard. Number 6. The blacklisted writer behind the Ape Planet. By 1951, Michael Wilson had won the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay for A Place in the Sun, shared with co-writer Harry Brown. He was at the top of the industry. 3 years later, the McCarthy-era blacklist branded him a communist sympathizer, and he couldn't work under his own name. He kept writing, different names, different countries, never his own. During that period, he co-wrote The Bridge on the River Kwai with Carl Foreman, also blacklisted, an adaptation of a Pierre Boulle novel. When Kwai won the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay in 1958, the Academy gave it to Boulle, the novelist, the man who had written the source material and not one word of the screenplay. He accepted the award. He spoke almost no English. Wilson was gone before the Academy got around to it, which is where Planet of the Apes comes in. Wilson was brought in to rewrite Rod Serling's expensive script, the one you just heard about. His main contribution beyond tightening the story is changing the ape society from technologically advanced to primitive, which is what makes the film affordable to shoot. That one decision is what makes the film possible. He finally got his name on screen for this one. He passed away in 1978. In March 1985, the Academy issued his corrected Oscar for Bridge on the River Kwai, the one Boulle had accepted on his behalf 26 years earlier. Wilson's widow accepted it. He had been gone for nearly 7 years. Number 5, the studio's side bet became its savior. In 1963, 20th Century Fox spent $44 million on Cleopatra. Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, scandal, reshoot after reshoot. The highest-grossing film of 1963 still lost enormous amounts of money. Fox was, by multiple accounts, on the edge of actual bankruptcy. For the rest of the decade, Zanuck and the studio were trying to dig out. Dr. Dolittle was going to be the answer. The big musical franchise, Rex Harrison talking to animals. Fox poured money and hope into it. Arthur Jacobs produced it. While he was in the middle of production, he had a coronary and nearly didn't survive. He kept producing. The studio greenlit Planet of the Apes as a consolation prize while everyone's attention stayed on Dolittle, the bet they were actually making. Dr. Dolittle opened in 1967. It was a critical and commercial catastrophe. Planet of the Apes opened in February 1968. It grossed $33.3 million on a budget of $5.8 million. The man who'd nearly lost his life making the wrong film watched the film nobody wanted save the studio that had barely tolerated him. Neither of them said much about that publicly. Number 4, the franchise that survived its own apocalypse. Nobody involved in making Planet of the Apes expected it to become a franchise. It ends with a man on his knees in the sand, the world already gone. There's nothing after that. That was the point. When the film became a phenomenon and Fox came to Heston about a sequel, he was direct about his position. He told Zanuck, "There's only the one story. You can have another picture about further adventures among the monkeys, and it can be an exciting film, but creatively there is no film." Fox needed him anyway. The sequel, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, couldn't launch without at least some participation from the original star. So they negotiated. Heston would appear. One condition: Taylor had to be written out permanently. The character had to end in a way that closed the door for good. He went further than that. The script he agreed to had Taylor detonate a doomsday device that destroys the entire planet. Not just Taylor's end, the end of the world the franchise existed in. Heston was convinced that if he destroyed the planet at the end of the film, nobody could make another sequel. The story would be over in the most absolute possible sense. He filmed the scene. Taylor falls. The planet falls. The screen goes dark. Then they made 3 more sequels anyway. Escape from the Planet of the Apes, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, Battle for the Planet of the Apes. They set them in the past, in the present, anywhere that wasn't the destroyed future. They found a way around a destroyed world because there was money to be made. And money finds a way. Heston spent a cameo trying to sabotage a franchise. The franchise looked at a destroyed planet, shrugged, and kept going. His sacrifice didn't even slow it down. Number 3, the man who built the apes' faces learned his craft rebuilding the faces of wounded soldiers, then spent decades secretly working for the CIA. Before John Chambers ever touched a Hollywood makeup chair, he spent years in a veterans hospital in Illinois rebuilding the faces of soldiers who had come home from the war damaged, fabricating ears, noses, orbital structures from rubber and foam, learning exactly how the human face is assembled, and how to reconstruct it when it isn't. He brought those skills to Hollywood, Spock's ears on Star Trek. Then Jacobs came to him for Planet of the Apes, and Chambers built a prosthetic system that hadn't existed. Foam latex applied in sections, fitted to each actor's face individually, designed to move with their expressions rather than fight them. The Academy had no category for it. They invented a special honorary award, and Walter Matthau presented it while an actual chimpanzee in a tuxedo carried the statuette to the stage. Here's the part almost nobody knew. For most of his career, Chambers was also working for the CIA codename Jerome Calloway. He built disguise kits for agents overseas. Then, in 1980, CIA officer Tony Mendez came to him with something larger. 6 American embassy personnel had escaped the hostage-takers and were hiding at the residence of the Canadian ambassador in Tehran. They needed a cover story to get out. Chambers helped construct a fake Hollywood production company from scratch. Business cards, trade ads, an entire false identity for a film crew that didn't exist. 6 people walked out of Iran as Canadian filmmakers scouting locations. That's the operation depicted in Argo, the skill he'd learned rebuilding soldiers' faces, that he perfected making apes look human. He used to make Americans look like Canadians in order to bring them home. Number 2, he fought 3 years for 1 film and got 5. Arthur Jacobs wanted to make Planet of the Apes. Every studio said no, every executive. He went to J. Arthur Rank in England. He went to Samuel Bronston in Spain. Zanuck at Fox threatened to have him banned from the lot if he mentioned apes again. Jacobs kept going back. He finally got the green light. Doolittle collapsed. Apes launched a franchise Jacobs produced through 5 films, from 1968 to 1973. He married Natalie Trundy in 1968, the same year the first film came out. She appeared in all 4 sequels, playing different characters across the franchise that existed because he wouldn't take no for an answer. On June 27, 1973, Arthur P. Jacobs suffered a fatal cardiac event. He was 51. Battle for the Planet of the Apes, the 5th and final film in the original franchise, was released that same year. He fought for 3.5 years to make 1 movie, produced 5 of them, and was gone the same year the last one came out. The franchise outlived him by decades. He never knew it would. Number 1, Rod Serling wrote The Future. He prayed was wrong. Rod Serling's Taylor is a man who left Earth because he couldn't stand what people were doing to each other. His opening monologue is a farewell to a species he'd given up on. He is going looking for something better than man. He doesn't find it. Serling spent his career doing something structurally similar. He used science fiction to say things that couldn't be said directly, about race, about war, about what happens when institutions decide certain people don't get to speak. Hollywood called him the angry young man. He clashed with executives and sponsors constantly, watching his sharpest work get blunted by censors every time it got too close to something real. He'd served as a paratrooper in the Pacific. He said afterward, "I was bitter about everything, and at loose ends when I got out of the service. I think I turned to writing to get it off my chest." Taylor's final scream, damning the species that destroyed itself, came from somewhere in Serling that was entirely real. He wasn't writing a science fiction ending. He was writing his own fear. In May 1975, Serling suffered a cardiac episode while running on a treadmill. He was 50. 2 weeks later, a second one. He was sent to Rochester for surgery, a 10-hour procedure. A third episode followed on the operating table on June 26, 1975. He was gone 2 days later. He never stopped believing the species might do better. He just kept finding it very hard to write that ending convincingly. The one he wrote for Taylor, on his knees in the sand, the world already gone, screaming at what we'd done to ourselves, was the one he spent his whole life hoping was wrong. And there you have it. 15 facts about Planet of the Apes that go a little deeper than the makeup budget. The 2 most famous lines improvised by a man with the flu, the Oscar winner who couldn't get a job after she won it, the producer who was gone the year the franchise he'd fought 3.5 years to make finally reached its last chapter, and the man who wrote a character who gave up on humanity while refusing himself to do exactly that. Which of these hit hardest? Let us know in the comments, and tell us which film we should cover next. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss the next one. Until next time.